in particular, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome our partners. First, Aura Burdett, who is an outreach worker for the Salvation Army Correction and Justice Services in London, Ontario, working primarily with women who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. Aura provides practical help and creates a network of support services for those reintegrating from custody into the community. And in this capacity, Aura also works with women who have been exploited in the sex trade or who have been trafficked themselves. In addition to her full-time role, Aura is also the chair of the London Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, whose primary mandate is prevention through education. Aura does numerous public speaking engagements about the harms of human trafficking in all its forms, and we are absolutely thrilled to welcome you this evening. Another partner with us is our friend Wendy Goldsmith, who is an advocate counselor with the London Abused Women's Centre and is a coordinator of the anti-human trafficking initiatives for the agency, which includes many speaking engagements focused on awareness, prevention, intervention, and the journey to justice for victims. Wendy is also a trainer for the Ministry of Children and Community Social Services and delivers free intensive 6-day training offered to anyone working with sexually exploited youth, including frontline staff, lawyers, police, and judges. Wendy co-facilitates this training with a woman with lived experience who is instrumental in helping folks understand the complexities of human trafficking in Canada and around the world. And we are absolutely privileged and thrilled to welcome you both this evening. We'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here, and we're really happy to provide this workshop. We're going to go through some pretty potentially difficult topics, but there are things that we, hope that will inspire you to think about how you can talk to your youth about whatever is happening in their lives. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Aura.
Okay, so thank you everyone for showing up. And just to set context, we wanted to bring this to you because education is key to prevention and protection of young people in our care. And this presentation is going to cover the basics about what human trafficking is in order to set context for you. Youth want to feel seen, heard, accepted, and valued. And if they're not getting that from family and friends, or they don't feel they're getting it from family and friends, then they will seek it elsewhere. And traffickers will prey on a person's needs. They will offer whatever it takes to build trust, which they can later use to manipulate and exploit. So the best protection against a trafficker is for youth to feel safe and secure where they are, and to have a trustworthy, authentic adult like yourselves to go to whenever needed. And that's often enough to avoid the tricks and traps of a trafficker. So now, to set the context, we're going to tell you a little bit about what human trafficking is. And of course, we first let you know that if you, at any point in time, you're feeling uncomfortable, then practice self-care, because these topics can be triggering. So what is human trafficking? The legal definition is the recruitment, transportation, harboring, and or exercising control, direction, or influence over the movements of a person in order to exploit that person. And there are a number of different ways that human trafficking can occur. Some of those ways are through sex trafficking, forced criminal activity, forced labor, and forced marriages, which are the most common types of trafficking in Canada and in Ontario, but mostly what we see is sex trafficking and forced labor. You might hear the difference between domestic and international trafficking, whereas domestic trafficking is any human trafficking that takes place within the Canadian borders, and international trafficking is any human trafficking that has involved crossing an international border. There are 3 elements necessary to meet the definition of human trafficking. In order to stand up in a court of law, a charge must be able to prove that all three pillars have occurred and are provable in a court of law. So they must have the action, the means, and the purpose that are evident. So the action would include things like harboring or moving a person, but not necessarily physically moving. It could be obtaining a person or kidnapping them or keeping them in their care. So through the means of force, fraud, or coercion. If force, fraud, or coercion is not present, then it's probably not a case of human trafficking. Could be other criminal activity that has taken place, but may not stand up as a human trafficking charge. And for the purpose of involuntary servitude, debt bondage, slavery, and so on. In Ontario, surprisingly, Ontario is the hub of human trafficking in Canada. 2/3 of all Canadian cases of human trafficking have taken place in our own province. And 73% of those cases in Canada involve Canadian children, youth, and young women. So it is not something that only happens to someone from another country. It happens to Canadians, and often it's Canadians who are doing the trafficking as well. This chart is from the 2020 United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and they have reported that in North America, the most common forms of human trafficking are sexual exploitation and forced labor. And you will see that there is a small portion of other types of human trafficking that are occurring in North America. But the majority are sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And there are a lot of factors that feed into that, and that's another whole discussion. What cannot be ignored is the Indigenous impact of human trafficking. While the Indigenous population in Canada is approaching 5% today, over 50% of underage trafficked girls and 51% of trafficked women are Indigenous. That's a significant overrepresentation in people who've been trafficked. The average entry age for trafficking Indigenous girls is 11 or 12. There are numerous factors that lead into this, that feed into this, including colonization. I'm not Indigenous myself, and it would be really incumbent on all of us to be able to explore this more deeply after you've seen this presentation. You may want to dig into that more on your own and see why this is impacting our Indigenous population to this extent. A lot of the results of colonization include broken family relationships as a result of families being pulled apart through the 60s scoop and the implementation of residential schools. Sex trafficking can happen to anyone and by any number of means, but the most common ones are listed on this screen. I'm not going to read them all because you can refer to this later online when it's posted. But significantly, online recruitment is on the rise through social media and other games and chat rooms. In-person recruitment does take place, and it's usually from someone that the individual knows. This is not common for someone to be snatched off the street, as in movies. That is actually not what happens. Here in Canada, it's through the development of personal relationships that the trafficker will exploit a young person. And we will go into more of that later in the presentation. And this can happen in many locations. Wherever youth will congregate, could be in youth shelters, could be in sports events, could be in community buildings and public events, commonly through hotels and motels and along major transit routes. This was a study done in 2014, and while it seems like that's a long time ago and the statistics really haven't changed that much, the majority of recruitment takes place by a friend or through another relationship, such as a boyfriend. That's, as you can see, the top bar and the lower bar are the ones that are predominant. So it's most common that someone is recruited through someone they know. For non-Indigenous people, 13 is the average age of recruitment into sex trafficking, whereas for an Indigenous person, the average age of being recruited is 11 or 12. And we have mentioned this, but it's worth repeating that the Indigenous people are overrepresented in human trafficking and in other criminal activity. Who are the most vulnerable people? While trafficking can take place, anyone can be subjected to becoming trafficked. Wherever there are vulnerabilities, the traffickers will exploit someone. They will look for those gaps, they'll look for vulnerabilities, they'll look where needs are not being met, and they will exploit those needs in order to manipulate someone. Predominantly, women and girls are the majority of victims in human trafficking cases because of their gender. Youth, especially young girls and young women, but also male youth and boys are also targeted. Indigenous and other racialized groups, LGBTQ, people who are struggling with other challenges such as addiction, mental health issues, homelessness, poverty, and so on. So anyone can be trafficked. This chart shows you a number of different vulnerabilities that someone can be manipulated through becoming homeless, being poor, suffering from addiction or mental health, and many other factors. But men and boys can also be trafficked. And so we must not ignore the fact that men and youth can be approached by a trafficker. So who are the traffickers? They aren't necessarily an organized crime, but can be. They can be acting alone as individuals or as family members. They can be they are most often known to the victim, and most commonly as in a love relationship or a perceived love relationship. The trafficker will deliberately set up a fake profile on the internet in a chat room, pretending to be someone that the youth can connect with, whereas in fact they could be totally different from what their profile is. And the key piece is that they want to develop a relationship of trust in order to be able to later manipulate that individual. So I'm going to turn this over now to Wendy, and Wendy will talk to you more about the ways that a trafficker will operate.
Thanks, Aura. Just looking at my screen here, this is a new platform for me. So Aura's already touched on some of this, but what you need to know as caregivers and parents is that this is how it starts. It can start very simply, as we call it, the Romeo pimp. It's the guy who comes with flowers. He gives you everything that you want, takes you out for the night, etc., and is too good to be true. And, you know, as the old saying goes, if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And so we're going to start to talk about the things that it's important for caregivers to look out for when this is happening. And I also want to say, you know, I've been working in social services for 35 years now, and I did not understand trafficking until the last 5 years. And this has been happening under our noses. And so it's really important that we all pay attention and understand what's happening and the risks that our children are at. So this is how it goes. The recruitment and grooming is the first stage. That's the Romeo pimp. Then this is really important. So if you notice that your young person is starting to isolate or not allowed to talk to so-and-so, that's really important for you to identify as a red flag, because that's how the trafficker is able to remove that person from their home life and traffic them. And I also want to say that it doesn't always have, like, trafficking doesn't always mean that a person is taken away. Some young people, they are trafficked and they still come home and they sleep in their own beds at night, you know, and they just keep secrets from their parents, etc. So these are the tactics. I'm having trouble seeing my screen, but I think I can manage. These are the tactics that an abuser will use. So they break, as I said, isolation. They give gifts. They minimize the harm. They say, you know, this is the lifestyle. It's called, you know, when you're being trafficked, it's actually called the game. So when you're in the game, it's the game. Everybody's doing it. It's okay. Often use drugs and alcohol. They will find any vulnerability that they can latch onto. So if someone's already exploring with weed and alcohol, for example, they'll jump onto that and then they'll escalate that to, I don't know, cocaine or meth or crack. That's how they lure. And then just something to be aware of is you know, these guys are pretty devious, and their trafficking is extremely lucrative, and they do not want to go to jail. So another thing that they will do is have other females recruit young women, and so that's just an important. It just shows you how insidious this crime actually is. So these couple of slides, you can have a look at them later because they'll be posted. I just want to highlight that there's sometimes some gray area around 16 and 17-year-olds. However, recently there's been a change to the Child and Family Services Act that says that 16 and 17-year-olds can be protected. And that's something that we're working on as a community to be able to provide space for them, because we know that when you're under 18, you can't consent. And that's really important to know as well. So again, just a little bit more about that. And this is something that comes up a lot because of when I talked about before the Romeo pimp, you know, a lot of kids who are involved get involved in trafficking, get lured into trafficking. They say, you know, it was my choice. But we have to really acknowledge that sexual exploitation of children is a crime. So these are some things to look for. We're going to start moving into things to look for and ways to engage with youth who you may worry about being engaged. Tattoos are one of the ways that we can start to identify who might be involved. Often a trafficker will tattoo a name, their name, or a barcode, something like that, that signifies that they belong to that person. So if you see that, I mean, you know, lots of kids have tattoos. That's pretty normal these days. But if you're starting to see things like this or anything that is a gang symbol, then that's a reason for concern. Thank you so much. So, these are not all indicators of being trafficked, of course, because we know that young people, as Ora said, the average age is 13, 14 of being at risk of being trafficked. And we also know that that's an age of, young people exploring their lives and moving away from parental authority. So I don't want you to think that these are all indicators of trafficking. However, it's really important for you to know and to be able to be aware. Sudden mood changes, lack of sleep, suddenly no appetite, an increase in drugs and alcohol use, late nights, gaps in memory, not telling you where they've been or who they're with. That's really an important one. And also multiple cell phones. If they don't have their ID or they've lost it, someone's taken it, that's also a tactic of an abuser to take a trafficked person's ID so that they don't feel like they have an ability to move around. And this just illustrates the cycle of trafficking. Often it's, as Ora said earlier, it's the kids who are most traumatized, who are at risk, who don't have lifelines, who don't have people in their lives that they feel that they can turn to. And so then instead they look to somebody else, like a trafficker, who they think is going to fill those needs. And this is also really important. We can't underestimate the link between pornography and prostitution and trafficking. It's just very clear. There's pornography is inundated with sexual violence against women, and that is often what is fueling the desire of the sex purchasers. And the sex purchasers, by the way, don't care whether a young person is being trafficked or not. They just want to act out whatever it is. So it's really important to understand that and to talk to your kids about that, and make sure that I know we can't control everything that kids see these days, but really important to talk to them about that and to explore the whole issue of sexuality and that what is normal and what is abusive. So I think I've covered this. I think that what traffickers try to do, and abusers in general, is to normalize the behavior. Everybody's doing this. This is okay. So you can begin to get a picture in your head of how that young person might be beginning to feel. I'm okay. This is all right. This person loves me. I'm just going to do whatever he says I'm supposed to do, and he's going to take care of me. So when we talk to kids, and I have 3 kids of my own, so it's really, I've learned as I've gone, as I'm sure all of you are doing. It's really, in my opinion, really important to listen more than we talk. Keep an open mind. Don't blame and shame. And if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out. That's what helps kids feel safe. And when when if you're worried that somebody is being, if you're worried that someone's being trafficked, if you're worrying that your kid is being trafficked, try to be calm. These kids have been through the gamut. They may have been exposed to drugs that they've never been exposed to, people they've never been exposed to, sexual activity that they've never experienced before. They may feel a lot of shame and guilt themselves. And so that's one of the reasons that it's really hard to work in this field, because trafficked victims don't want to name the abuse that they've experienced. And sometimes they still feel in love with their trafficker. So these are all important points to consider.
I actually just want to jump back for a second there, Wendy. We had someone ask a question. And so if you can just go back one slide, it specifically talks about yeah, perfect. So it specifically talks about the fact that many people may not identify as a victim. And so this person asked, can you talk a bit about words that kids and teens might use when they are involved in this? Will they say they are being trafficked, for example? And so this screen kind of talks about the fact that that's kind of an academic term. And so they may not, again, trafficking might not even be a word in the vocabulary to know that that's what's going on with them. But I'm just wondering if, Aura and Wendy, if you have any of the lingo, so to speak, as to what kids and teens might refer to this as.
Yeah, great question. And I think, it's my boyfriend. The game, the so-called game becomes a lifestyle. So a traffic person gets used to whatever it is that's happening. So the drugs, the alcohol, the late nights, the parties, all of that stuff. And so they just, and I think it's really hard sometimes for a young person to say, holy cow, this is actually happening to me and I didn't choose it. Because that's the lure of the trafficker, that they will lure in a way that makes the traffic person feel like they actually chose that lifestyle.
Yeah, I'll just chime in as well. I think they're going to be talking about the trafficker as a boyfriend or a friend. They're going to be talking about going on a date when that might not be a choice for them, but they are never going to tell you that was not their choice. The date could be a place where a sexual assault is taking place and not something consensual at all. They're not going to tell you that that this was a violence against them. They're going to say, well, we went to a party and things went bad, and a party isn't really a party in the terms of socializing, people getting together and having fun together. A party is probably where they are being victimized by a group of individuals at that location. It has nothing to do with having fun. They're not the ones that are having fun. They might talk about getting expensive gifts and being lavished with presents. And really, these are indebtedness to the trafficker, but that the youth might have to then pay off by attending these parties. So you might hear these very bland phrases when really what's underscoring that is the violence, and the kid is not going to tell you that they're in trouble, that they're having these things happen to them. They're going to be using then the words of dating, party, gift, friend, boyfriend, I'm in love, and that kind of thing. But what the story is not going to hold together. When you ask about it, there's going to be a lot of gaps. There's going to be things that don't make sense, and they're not going to be able to cover the gap. So if you find that they're talking about something that doesn't make sense, that they're leaving out crucial details, that there's a lot of fabrication in their story, then you can be pretty sure there's something else going on. And it could just be drugs, and that's a huge thing on its own if it's drug involvement. But there could be a lot of other things going on besides sexual exploitation, or in addition to sexual exploitation, because trafficking doesn't usually happen in a silo on its own. There's usually drugs, manipulation, coercion, criminal activity, forced criminal activity, and a lot of other things going on that the youth might feel that they are responsible, that it's their behavior that caused it to happen to them. So they're going to be very reluctant to talk about it because the trafficker has already created a situation where they feel at fault and responsible for what's going on. And if they were better, or if they were kinder, or if they were prettier, or if they were doing what they're supposed to be doing, that this kind of stuff wouldn't be happening to them. So that it makes it very, very difficult for them to come out and speak about it.
Well
Thank
said,
you
Aura.
both for that. Yeah.
And
And oh, sorry, I just wanted to add in, we have somebody else joining us, and apparently my chat function is also being a little uncooperative tonight in terms of technology. But somebody else mentioned that they work in this field in a different region, and they're noticing a lot of times that people will refer to it as having gained a ride. So that might be another set of terminology that comes up. So thank you, everybody, for that. And Wendy, you're welcome to keep going whenever you like.
yeah, thank you. And any shift in language is a really good indicator. You know, if your kid used to say, I'm going to John's house and suddenly says I've gained a ride, for example, then you know something's shifting. And I think the important point for caregivers and parents to know is listen to your kids, talk to your kids, ask them questions. You know, don't ignore the fact that they are their behaviors have changed. And before we just get to a discussion about the services and supports that are available for families and youth who are being trafficked, I want to highlight the importance of self-care, both for caregivers and to encourage young people. Those moments of stillness, those moments when we can take in nature, those moments when we are able to just be, are very important to reconnecting to who we are. And so one of the things that a trafficker will do is try to rob us of who we are. That's a strategy. That's a tactic of abuse that abusers use. That traffickers use. And so it's really important to try to bring that in whatever way you can. If you're worried about someone, or if you are a person being trafficked, trying to bring back those elements of self-care is really important. Okay, so these are some help lines that I really encourage you to remember and write down. Of course, 911 if it's an emergency, but Crime Stoppers is also a great resource. You can report anonymously. Kids Help Phone for Kids, cybertips.ca online, and Canada's Human Trafficking Hotline. They are doing really excellent work. They are available 24/7. They have access to all of the, they're coast to coast to coast in Canada. And so they have access to all of the supports and resources that are available to anybody who is at risk of being trafficked or is being trafficked, or a family member who's worried about someone being trafficked. So those are good resources to remember. And then this is just a little bit about us. Aura, do you want to start?
Sure. This is our main, for the Salvation Army Correctional Justice Services London, these are our main numbers. So the 432-9553 is a landline in the office, which if you don't get through to anybody there, it's because we're out and about with people. So my cell phone is on there. If you need to reach me, that's my work cell phone. So you can text, and feel free to give that number to your young people. We also have Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and that's another number you can give to your young people if they want to reach out and get help. And ATLOSA also works with Indigenous youth. So these are numbers that you can use yourselves if you want more information from us. But also your young person is welcome to call and talk to us as well. And we'll make sure that they get connected to an appropriate service that will help them in that moment. Yeah. Wendy, did you want to say more?
Yeah, thanks. And London Abuse Women's Center is where I work. I'm an advocate counselor there, and we offer individual counseling to anybody who has experienced any kind of intimate partner violence, usually male violence against women, but not necessarily, and anyone who has experienced any kind of sexual exploitation. And we're able to offer that free of service, same as Aura at the Salvation Army and YOU. And we also offer group counseling, and we're able to offer that up to 3 years for women and girls who have been sexually exploited.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. One of the things that was asked is if we can return back to the slide. So I'm just going to take control for the moment of that presentation. And I'm just going to bring us back to those slides about ages. So some people had some question, and it is something that's really important for us to take a look at, especially those of us working in schools or with children of this age. And I think I even have, nope, that's the slide there. So just being able to look at this and think about the relationship between young people and the age gap that exists. A big thing that's been brought to our attention last week when we had another presentation with somebody else from London Abuse Women's Centre was really focusing on the idea of trust and power and authority, right? So acknowledging that regardless of age gap, if there is a position of authority, that then changes that dynamic. So for example, somebody who has a babysitter, for example, and even if they are within that less than 5 years older, it would be considered sexual exploitation if that person is a position of authority, such as a babysitter. And Wendy and Nora, I wasn't sure if you want to speak more. I know we kind of said we'll leave this up. For anyone who's wondering, the presentation and slides will be made available on the website. That said, it will take us a bit of time to take the recording, edit it, and ensure that everybody's okay with having it posted first. So please be patient with us as we will get that up as soon as possible. But Wendy and Aura, anything about this slide? And I'll also just jump to the next one as well.
I think what the key is that we think that anyone, once somebody is 16, that they can consent to sexual activity, and that's most of what general population thinks about consent. That when they're 16, they can consent to sexual activity. And actually, that does not translate to agreeing to be prostituted or agreeing to be sex trafficked. If they're under 18, they cannot agree to sexual activity or sexual exploitation in sexual activity. So under 18, it's human trafficking, it's sex trafficking if they are being exploited by a third person. And if they are under 18, then there is that element of, if they're between the age of 16 and 18, are they consenting? Is the person in a position of authority and trust? If they're under 16, then what? If there's an age gap of less than 5 years, then a person of 14 and 15 can consent to activity with a peer who is less than 5 years older, as long as there's no position of trust, authority, or dependency in play. And someone who's 12 or 13 can agree to sexual involvement with someone who is less than 2 years older, again, providing there's no relationship of trust, authority, or dependency. And also they must be aware and cognizant and able to make an informed decision. So if someone has been drugged or inebriated, or they're asleep, or they're unconscious, then consent cannot take place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Can I
clarifying that.
can I jump in
can
and
I
ask
just
a quick
add?
question? Wendy, go ahead first, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Okay, I just want to say herein lies the complexity, because, everything Aura said is absolutely true. And this is where, a young person might say to you, I'm choosing this. I want this. He's my boyfriend. I love him. And between the ages of 16 and 17, where is the authority to intervene? And so that becomes a burden on parents and other people in authority to know how to intervene. And that's when it's very important that child welfare is on board with what we are doing to try to prevent trafficking.
Yeah.
Thank you. That lends some clarity. I was also hoping that maybe the two of you could comment on, what is known about the trafficker. What I learned tonight, I think, is really helpful, and that is that a trafficker could use a peer. So this might be a peer who is, your daughter's friend coming over. It could be your son's buddy coming over. It could be, and so understanding, and maybe the two of you could make a little bit more commentary, it might be that this individual appears starkly older than the youth. It also might not be the case. Could you just let us in on some of that information as well?
Yes. Trafficking by peer is on the rise. Trafficking by someone who is maybe the same gender, or could be a female trafficking another female, or a female trafficking several females, that the girls just think that they are in a friendship group and not realize until it's too late that they've gotten themselves involved in something much bigger and much more dangerous than they originally thought was going to happen. So yes, that's on the rise, and girls are becoming more and more violent in their criminal activity. So that's also on the rise. Youth trafficking other youth, that's happening more often. But quite often, it's important to remember and not vilify these kids who are trafficking other kids, because they themselves are being manipulated by, almost invariably are being manipulated by an older person who is controlling them, or who has some way of manipulating them because they've got them under a barrel. They said, okay, if you don't do this, then I'm going to tell your mom that you took these pictures and that we'll put them on the internet. Or I know where your little brother goes to school. I know I know where you live. I know, who your relatives are. I'm going to tell them all this stuff that you've been doing. So the kid is often being exploited by someone older than them, who is very manipulative, could be very charming, and maybe even the family knows who they are, and they're just really good at telling lies, so that there's no way of being able to tell that that's what's going on. But they might see a reluctance in their youth to want to spend more time with that individual, or a reluctance in their youth to wanting to go out and hang out with those friends when something bad has happened to them that they don't want to talk about. So any change in their usual behavior, any change in their demeanor, any, increased reluctance, increased levels of fear or anxiety, nightmares, radical changes in behavior, increases in secrecy, talking more, or saying, almost being, where sexual activity is normalized, violence is normalized, and that's not the norm for their kid, and they're starting to talk about things indifferently where normally that would be upsetting to them. Those are all signs that something else is going on.
And I can't stress enough, the importance of empowering our young people to believe in themselves, to have their vision, whatever it is, and the path that they want to go on, that to a trafficker is not going to be attractive. You know, so that's really important, that the more that we can do that in our families, in our communities, that's going to protect our kids.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I do just want to open it up to our participants. If anybody has any specific questions, I see a few rolling into the chat. I understand that that's open tonight. So please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. So one of the ones that just came in, it says, do schools have education for children to help prevent fear for blackmailing? So this is where maybe we can reach out to our colleague, Christy, who could speak to some of the Thames Valley resources that have been created, and see what she has to say about that.
Thanks. And my computer is not cooperating with me, so I'm not seeing people's faces. So do we have education for children help preventing? So I'm guessing if that's in reference to like photos and that sort of stuff. So today is National Anti-Human Trafficking or National Human Trafficking Awareness Day in Canada. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if we covered that at the beginning. So we are releasing our resources. We did release our resources today within Thames Valley. So what we have released is lessons for grades 7 to 12 as the first phase. And those lessons include content on healthy relationships, consent, and anti-sex trafficking. So it doesn't specifically touch on that specific topic that has been asked, but we are also, our implementation phase for our anti-sex trafficking protocol is for 5 years. So we cannot accomplish everything in one go. So that was our first step, is releasing those, but we are also looking at cyber hygiene stuff, cyber safety, same thing, and furthering our healthy relationship stuff. So I'm thinking and guessing, just based on what's in that question, that is specifically around cyber stuff. So that is in the works and will come out within the next, we're working on creating and vetting information resources that exist to find what we will use to release in the coming months. If that
The other
answers that
thing,
question.
it does, and having seen the healthy relationships content that you so intricately helped develop, Christy, it starts at the grade 7 content is excellent around understanding healthy relationships, and part of healthy relationships is never exploiting and never saying, if you don't do this, then I'm going to do this. So that content does teach our young people about a healthy way to relate to one another and about the power dynamics in relationships. And so that is the foundation and what lends itself to understanding when things aren't appropriate. In terms of internet safety and safety in those types of online relationships, we know that is in development. And don't forget that we're also developing a caregiver presentation for this same well-being series to talk about cyber hygiene. And so those are some of the important topics as well that we'll be offering further evening presentations.
Sorry, and thank you, Tiffany. You've just prompted me to think of one more part, is also just the healthy relationships with self as well, right? Because touching on what Wendy and Aura had said, is that if as individuals we love ourselves, we're strong, we're connected, we have all those supports and those lifelines, I think is what Wendy had said, then we're less likely to be exploited, to be manipulated, to fall for those manipulations and the instances like that, because we value and respect and love ourselves. And not saying that those who are victims are not. I don't want it to come across that way, but building that sense of identity and healthy relationship with ourselves is also a starting and foundation for helping to prevent stuff from happening.
Thank you. And just in relation to the other boards that we represent, because we are a kind of group connected to other boards, one of the things that Christy will know probably better than most of us here is that, our interventions as it relates to healthy relationships and consent and the prevention of human trafficking is a ministry directive. It is a legal requirement that this information needs to be developed and delivered. And so as a result, although we won't as intimately know what's being developed for, say, London Catholic District Catholic School Board or the other smaller school boards that we're connected to, we would want you to know that the Ministry of Education in some ways is sort of leading the way on saying that, education school systems are universal access to our young folks. I saw a little thumbs up there. So I think that means that's a good thing. And I would agree. Absolutely.
I can quote it if you want to Google it. It's PPM 166, keeping kids healthy and safe in schools, I think, but it's definitely PPM 166 from the Ontario Ministry. And it's that all school boards in Ontario, public or private, do need to, I shouldn't say private, all school boards in Ontario need to have anti-sex trafficking protocol.
Thank you for
Amazing.
that.
Thank you.
So a couple of other things have come our way, and one of them, I recognize that we've got many participants here who come from similar lines of work, perhaps in different regions, perhaps here in London. So there's some other pieces of information being shared, which is also fantastic for us to know. One of which is just the commentary that when it comes to the slide that was talking about CAS and children who are now 16 and 17, acknowledging the fact that we, as soon as an individual turns 16, that we can't force them back to a facility, a home, anywhere like that, and that it comes down to doing wellness checks with the organization of the police. And I don't know if Wendy and Nora want to speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, could I just speak to that? I
Absolutely.
I totally agree. The thing is, in Ontario, traffickers knew that there was a loophole with 16 and 17-year-olds, and so they would swoop in. And so now the legislation is not perfect by any means, but it gives us an opportunity to try to intervene with a 16 or 17-year-old, whereas previous to that, we would not have been able to intervene. She's 16, she's outside of CFSA, and so we can't do anything. So now this gives us a little bit of wiggle room to, if we have a relationship with a youth, that we can say, hey, can I take you away from this for a little bit of time and see if there's a safe space for you?
Thank you for sharing that. And it looks like
Sorry,
Christy's got a question.
Yeah. Can I just add to that as well? I just want to, again, be transparent for any parents and caregivers that when a youth is 16 or 17, we can also call CAS so Children's Aid Society, and you can also reach out to CAS because the Child Youth Family Service Act has changed so that for that age group, CAS can also be contacted and intervene even if a parent or caregiver is being protective, right? Like, so if my child is being trafficked, I'm aware, I can also get CAS to become involved and support which is new. Before it was if the parent is aware, or so that's for any age. So regardless of the age, if your child is being trafficked and you are aware and you're trying to support them, you can still get CAS involved. And as a school, we would likely make a call to CAS as well, not to punish, but to try and provide further support for you and your child or youth that is being trafficked, if that made sense.
Thank you. Again, there's lots of nuance to this, so we really appreciate everybody's input. I'm going to just double check and see if anybody else has any other questions. We do have a few brief moments, so please feel free to pop that into the chat or into the Q&A function. But while we're doing that, I'm just going to let Tiffany wrap us out a little bit, and then we've got a couple of pieces as well that I'll mention at the end.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I want to do is express our deep gratitude for Wendy and Aura and their willingness to come together with us today and provide this presentation to caregivers and families. This is important information. And as Wendy had said, for some folks, it is new and it had been occurring all along. And so the enemy of a trafficker is information. and for folks to know what to look for, what to see, to be active and communicate with one another to protect our youth. So this is exactly the thing we want to be doing in order to be a more active community when it is our province that is, the main source in our country of this type of victimization. And so thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for speaking. We know it can be daunting to be on camera and be in a recording. And so we thank you for your bravery in doing that. We want to always keep the conversation going with our caregivers. And so should you have any more questions or require more information, not only did you have Wendy and Aura's contact information, as well as local organizations that provide support, but we would also like you to know, for example, I'm here, I'm a school social worker with Thames Valley Board, and I'm not going anywhere. So if you need to reach out to me and get critical contacts to support you or someone you know or more information, I really encourage you to do that. Also, if you had moments for us to give us some feedback regarding our caregiver presentations, what you've seen and heard tonight, we really appreciate that, because we want to ensure that the work that we're doing is meeting the needs of our caregivers and families in the community. And so you can see that the link is right here. And I don't know that you can click on it, but you could take a picture of it. Also, on our website, this link for the feedback is located on our website. And on that very same website, you will find more information about past and future workshops. So we mentioned recordings. It takes us a little while to edit them, but we promise you that they are going to be there, and you have the ability to view them. And oh, look at that. Thank you, Meenakshi, for letting me know that you can actually click on this link and do that feedback if any of you are so inclined this evening, just a couple of minutes. Also on our website at the top of the site, there are links to sign up for our mailing list. And so if you like getting information about presentations, webinars, and topics that are relevant to you, please sign up for our mailing list to be able to have that contact and regular kind of bumpers around what we're doing, but also what community partners are doing. You will see that on the website. And I see two hands. I see Christy first and then Caitlin. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one more thing just on the on transparency. If you go on the TVDSB website and you click in the search box anti-sex trafficking protocol, the protocol is there for everyone to see. So you can read through it. There's all the information is there about what our plan is for the next 4 or 5 years. So just again, only for the Thames Valley Board, but it is there for everyone to have eyes on.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And then say, for example, that you're joining us this evening and you're a caregiver of a youth in another board or in another area, and you're thinking, who is my contact? Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if I don't know the answer, it might take me a little while, but I promise to find it for you. And so happy to get you those contacts. And go ahead, Caitlin.
So the last thing I just want to mention, and Tiffany, you highlighted that last piece, is the mailing list. So not only will it allow you to know about things upcoming, but that will also help to notify you, should you sign up, about when these recordings become available. So if you're looking for these, that will come out in an email blast through the mailing list. The other piece I want to mention as well is that hopefully in the next few weeks, we will have the recording and materials available from last week's presentation, which they tie together quite nicely. So last week we heard from Kelsey Morris at the London Abused Women's Centre, who spoke to supporting our youth with healthy, intimate relationships and consent. So when caregivers are asking, what do I do? And we're talking about these healthy relationships. What does that mean? What does that look like? Who can consent? What are some of the red flags? What are some of the green flags? Kelsey's presentation ties in really beautifully. So signing up for that mailing list will make sure that as soon as both of these presentations are available as recordings, that you are the first to know. So please feel free.
Perfect. And on that note, we wish everyone well on your daily journey. Please be safe. If you have to go out, please remain warm if you get to stay in. And we really hope to see you again at future workshops. Thanks again, Wendy and Nora. Just
Thank
awesome information.
you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.